Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on how to troubleshoot slow logons for Citrix or VMware Horizon. By ways of introduction, my name is Stacy Ladwinger, and I run marketing here at Goliath. I am joined with Yemi Ladyju, who's our senior technical consultant. Before we jump in, I do want to do just a few housekeeping items. In terms of today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges and why troubleshooting slow logons are so difficult, especially when you're dealing with a higher level of remote workers these days. We then are going to go through some how you would troubleshoot without any help from technology, really identifying what does a day in the life look like as an administrator and what are those steps you need to do to troubleshoot. Then we're going to identify a better, more automated way to assist you, and we're going to leverage customer use cases as well as demo the technology to identify a better way. We will take questions at the end, so please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them. And one question we always get is, will this recording be available? Yes, within the next 24 hours, a recording of this webinar will be in your inbox. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So often when we talk to administrators of our customers or we're out there in the industry talking to IT pros, what they say is the challenges that come up with troubleshooting slow logons really centers around the lack of information and data. And so what happens is an end user complains that they can't log in, it's slow to log in, things are disconnecting. And that's often when there starts to be finger pointing. Is it the infrastructure challenges with Citrix or Horizon? Is it at the application layer that there's an issue? Now with remote workers, is it their endpoint? Is it the home Wi-Fi network? And so there's a whole slew of areas that could be causing the issue. And when you don't have visibility into that root cause, it often makes for some interesting dialects with either other IT counterparts, the end users themselves, the application owners. Lack of information leads to lack and poor communication. And really also the challenge is you as IT pros are so reliant on the subjective information that your end users give you. How often do you receive a ticket or a call that says, yesterday my login was slow? Well, what time? I don't know, all day. Was it really all day? Was there a specific point in time? Is it working today? Worst of all, probably apathy is set in. And so you actually don't receive a lot of tickets or a lot of complaints. And all of a sudden you send out an IT survey, everyone complains that they don't have the right performance they need to be successful, and you're really caught off guard on your heels. Now, the reason these challenges exist really occurs because there's a lot of complexity. And you, as a Citrix or a VMware Horizon expert, might understand the complexity, but when you're talking to management or your business counterparts, they don't understand that in order to deliver that user experience, there's over 15 technologies that need to come together in concert to deliver that seamless experience. So first, think about your users. Every one of your users are unique. They have different endpoints. They're working from different locations. Many now are remote. They have different behaviors. Some like to stream audio in the background. Some tend to have a large amount of files sitting on their desktop. So all of that makes for a unique scenario of how they're even connecting in. All can impact logon time. From there, then, you have the entire infrastructure. So you'll have your Citrix environment, for example, or this could be Horizon. So you've got NetScaler, Storefront, your controllers, you've got your applications themselves. If you're in healthcare, you have your EHR applications. Engineering, you might have your ERP or other CAD software. A lot of these applications can take a lot of bandwidth, take a lot of memory and CPU usage when you're delivering them in your virtualized environment. You then have your back-end environment of licensing servers, profile servers, Active Directory, your hypervisor host. And you can add even more complexity to this where different elements of your back-end are in the cloud and some are on premises. They might even be in a private cloud versus a public cloud. So the amount of variability that can happen all to deliver that end user experience is significant. So when your end user calls in and says, my logon is slow, if you don't have the right visibility into these different systems and performance, it makes it nearly impossible to pinpoint that the root cause is maybe a bad GPO within your profile settings. And so you need a solution that is going to give you the visibility at a very granular level so you can isolate root cause of those issues quickly and resolve them. The other challenge around all of this is there's just a lack of experts out there. So we actually worked with Citrix and they gave us these numbers. There's a high demand. On average, a Citrix customer needs about 2 to 3 admins really to support their environment. That's a medium-sized environment. Some are less, some are higher. But on average, think about the need for Citrix experts like you on the phone is about 1.2 million. Now on the supply side, at the highest level of certifications, there's only 62 certified professionals. There's another around 150 at best of the CTAs, and then there's probably about 50,000 of all various levels that have gone through some level of certification. So at best, you might have 60,000 experts out there. So obviously the demand is much higher than the supply. And that makes it challenging because typically many of you are working with less resources that are ideal. You might be looking for resources and simply can't find them, or you're trying to bring other resources up to speed that maybe have a strong Microsoft background or others that are trying to understand the complexity of the virtual world. And these numbers don't change a whole lot if you're talking about VMware Horizon. The other piece of this then is when you are an expert, you spend so much of your time troubleshooting basic issues. We were talking to a Citrix CTP, George Spears, who's based out of Ireland, and he says he can spend up to 30% of his time just troubleshooting basic issues. What I've heard, especially from our customers, with the increase of remote working, this has gone up to 40, 50% of their time. Because as a minute the help desk hears, it's slow to log on to Citrix. Citrix is disconnecting. They immediately escalate those over to the admin. And so when it comes to really solving these issues, you're not able to look at the bigger picture and identify best ways to improve performance. Instead, you're spending your day troubleshooting very isolated root causes. Well, we're here today to talk about there is a better way. And a better way is with purpose-built technology that really gives you the metrics you need around the end user experience so you can anticipate problems before they impact end users and fix them. If problems do occur, because they always will, give you the information to isolate root cause quickly and then resolve. And finally, document what's going on. Document that a permanent fix solution has been put in place. Document that that fix solution is still working 2, 3, 6 months later, and giving you access to that data so that you can share it with your IT counterparts, management, end users. You can integrate it into tools like a ServiceNow or Splunk, and you can automate and enhance with out-of-the-box reports that are coming into your inbox weekly, monthly, yearly. And when organizations invest in this type of technology, they truly transform from being reactive, responding to those subjective requests, reacting to apathy that maybe it comes through in a survey, to proactive, so that these issues truly are completely prevented and avoided. And as you can see, and we're going to explain how we do this on the next slide, is we really focus the technology on the core areas that most end users complain about. And today we're going to talk about the first two. Most end user tickets come around a logon initiation. Someone can't log into their system. Logon duration, it's taking too long to log in, whether it be to Citrix or an individual app that might be Surface or Horizon. And then session performance, things are lagging or you're being disconnected. Really, almost all tickets can be bucketed into one of these three. And so what we've done with our technology is we've actually embedded intelligence and automation that will automatically identify your virtual environment. It will identify what failure points, IT conditions that you need to alert on should thresholds be exceeded, and then alert you when those are exceeded. It's that intelligence that allows us to really supplement and almost be a full-time troubleshooting expert in your environment so that you don't have to find those experts that maybe don't even exist in your region. This is why, once we go to the next slide, all of these logos here that you see have invested in Goliath. And you can see we've scaled to some of the largest Citrix and Horizon environments. We also support small and medium businesses because we have an ease of use and a price point that really meets their needs. We also have a focus in healthcare. So I know we've got some health systems on the line today. We have purpose-built modules for all the major EHR systems, Cerner, Epic, Meditech, Allscripts. And so we can combine the metrics all the way from your end users to that data center into your EHR application so we can truly identify why you have slow logons or poor session performance when you're logging into a Cerner, an Epic, and all scripts are meta tech. And as I said, the way that these organizations continually justify the investment they have in Goliath is that they say by leveraging Goliath, they've basically supplemented their workforce by 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts that are always available, that are preventing issues and finding issues and resolving them quickly when they do arise. So with that then, I'm going to turn this over to Yemi, and he's going to talk about, and he's got a lot of certifications when it comes to Citrix. He's been in these environments. He's going to talk about what a typical day in the life looks like, and what does that checklist look like if you're trying to go ahead and isolate root cause of slow logons if you don't have purpose-built software. Yemi?
Thanks, Stacy. And at least, when we're talking about logon times and getting reports from users that you have, that they have, let's say, a long logon time, what we find is that, the checklist is to try to understand the pattern. You want to understand, is this happening to this individual user? Is it happening to multiple users? If it is happening to multiple users, are there any similar infrastructure components that affect both of those or all of those sessions? Find those similarities to try and sort of isolate it down to, is it a specific server? Is it from a specific location? Things like that. So it's very sort of a very broad look, right? You start to take a broad look at all of the affected sessions, find those similarities, whether those are delivery controllers, whether those are network components, so on and so forth. The next thing is to investigate their profiles. Of course, you would check director to see if it's a profile issue at a high level. You want to make sure that, of course, there is no corruptions from that perspective. You also want to check the infrastructure, right? The machine that the users were actually logging into, whether it's a VDI machine or if it's a shared desktop or shared application session. You want to look at that server, take a look at CPU, RAM, of course, memory utilization. You also want to take a look at sort of the hypervisor metrics for the time frame of that session as well. So you could probably hop onto your hypervisor console, whether that's Citrix hypervisor, or of course VMware Hyper-V, and take a look at the host that was supporting that user for the time frame of the session and try to align, okay, what was CPU ready on that hypervisor host doing at that time frame, or what was the memory utilization there? Was there any bandwidth issues, disk latency and storage latency, or all sort of things from a resource utilization perspective that can definitely impact the ability for a user to log into a particular session. Of course, you have to check in with the network team, make sure that there are no connectivity gaps between, let's say, your delivery controller and the machine that actually ended up brokering or supporting that specific session. You also want to take a look at your domain controller, maybe run a ping from that machine over to the domain controller, which is going to give you a point in time sort of latency metric for that particular, being able to check the latency between the domain controller and that machine. But of course, you can't retroactively run a ping for the time frame of that session. So you might have a gap there when you're talking about the connectivity or the communication for that user session when that session was going on. And of course, you can take a look at your gold image. You can run some optimizer tools. If you also wanted to take a look at GPOs and see if there are any frozen or delayed GPOs, you could maybe create a brand new user group or something like that, or OU, and then start to add these GPOs to them to see if there's any specific ones that impacted the session. But ultimately, all of these steps have to be taken because there is no sort of full visibility into where exactly the problem is. Because let's say it is a network-related issue, that's typically a quick fix. Or let's say it's something with a domain controller issue, right? If you understand what the problem is, it typically is a quick fix. However, because you don't have visibility into all of these things that impact the user session aligned to the time frame that this user is trying to log in, it is very difficult because you have to then go through all of these steps in order to find exactly what that problem was. Before we go into the demo, we like to sort of give a customer use case. So I'll pass it back over to Stacy to talk about this specific customer, and then we'll dive right into the technology.
Thanks, Yemi. And really, this is a home healthcare provider. They've got about 30 locations across the U.S. And they were doing a lot of what Yemi just said. Anytime any of their providers or their reservation specialists were experiencing slow logon, they were calling in and the team was going through that checklist. The challenge is it could take the team hours or even days to get through that checklist. And where they were feeling a lot of pain was with their reservation specialist. People were calling in, and we've seen this, whether it's home healthcare or others, they were calling in to go ahead and set an appointment. And their reservation specialists were saying, I'm sorry, that my system's slow, I can't get in, can you hold? And so this was really impacting the quality, not only of customer service, but at the end of the day, patient care, because they deeply believe that patient care doesn't just start when their home health caregiver enters the house or does telehealth these days, but it starts with when they call and set an appointment. And if that person can't schedule an appointment quickly, it's impacting their overall experience. And so they put in Goliath, and they were able to identify root causes within minutes. And they realized that it wasn't just one thing. It was a whole variety of things. Yemi, do you want to talk about some of the different root causes that they were able to go ahead and identify and then take us in the software?
Sure, absolutely. The first, and you can, as you can notice here on the screen, a lot of what they were able to find were some of those things that we talked about in the checklist. The first thing was high CPU utilization, specifically CPU ready from the hypervisor host. So that was sort of contributing in a sort of widespread area to poor session and poor login times to their applications. And that's going to be across the board. So it's more sort of indicative of an infrastructure issue. What they also found out is that, and this is very prevalent in a lot of environments, there are multiple issues, right? So the next thing was group policies. They had policies like drive mapping policies to drives that were decommissioned, or they had policy timeouts and things like that were taking place in the environment. So they were able to pinpoint the exact policies that they needed to deprecate or to remove from the environment and cut down their logon times. And also, they were seeing some memory utilization issues for some legacy hypervisor hosts as well. And they were able to sort of leverage the technology to help remove those from rotation, so that they can sort of, so that they could, ultimately give a better experience to the users. So without sort of any further slideware, let's actually jump right into the technology and talk a little bit about where they went to get to this information and how they were able to leverage it. So what I'm actually displaying on the screen here is our Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. And this is where all of the sessions in the environment are going to populate. Of course, you can see your published, your shared desktop, shared application sessions, your app servers. But here we'll focus on the VDI sessions. You can see the users, of course, some information about their connection, what session, what version of receiver they have, what delivery controller was in charge of brokering their sessions. And a couple of things that I wanted to point out that were very helpful to this particular customer was, number one, the ability to pull historic sessions in their technology. So here we're showing sessions for the last 2 months. And, you could go back months, weeks, days, if you would like. And we do not average or roll up any information that we collect in the technology. So you get the same amount of granularity in a session from a week ago as you would from a current session or a session that happened today, which gives you the ability to say, to definitively say what has changed in the environment that may be causing an issue today that might not have caused an issue in the past. But we can take a look at all of our sessions here. Of course, you can filter or use this quick search to find the particular user that you're looking for, or maybe sort by logon times or something like that. But once you've isolated a session you want to look at, you can then click down on that session. What you get is a sort of pop-up of 7 tabs that's going to break down every single thing that went into the user session. So you can see here there's a dedicated tab for the logon process, which we will dive into in a second. But of course, you can see there's an ICA HDX channel tab. There's a VDI sort of session host tab, hypervisor host tab, all the way down to any alerts and event logs that take place on this machine. So by the time you have actually traversed the entire the tabs here, you're able to emerge with a conclusion as to what was negatively impacting this particular user session. But let's, for this particular example, drill into the logon duration tab to talk about what metrics are available. So this particular customer, they were able to take a look at the logon tab for the affected sessions. They were able to see, you know, at the top here, what's happening during the brokering stages of the process. So on the left, what's happening at the delivery controller. This is where you see your drive mapping, printer mapping, profile load times, etc. And then on the left, you can, on the right, you can see what's happening at the client. So Citrix receiver or Workspace app. And this is gotten without deploying any technology to that endpoint machine itself, right? Wherever this user is located, you can actually see things like ICA file download, how long it took to establish the micro VPN connection. So sort of high level receiver or Workspace app startup metrics that impact sort of the overall logon time. So you could identify quickly if there is a problem, and if that problem is happening within the data center or at the client section or at the client's location while they're trying to access the environment. A couple of things that are important to point out here as well. For instance, if I was able to see a high ICA file download for a particular session, that automatically makes me think that there's probably some poor connectivity at that user's location. I can then flip over to the summary tab and take a look here at the connection speed metric, specifically to show if this user at the beginning of their session had enough connectivity for this particular session. What I can also do, so that way I can take a look at if there is a client-related network issue that impacts the session. But if I wanted to take a look at what's happening inside of the data center, I can look here at the bottom of the screen where I can expand these different sections. So now I can see authentication. I can now see what OUs this user is a part of, what domain controller was in charge of authenticating this session. I can see how long it took for those LDAP calls to take place. So if there was some latency between the domain controller and the delivery controller, I'm able to quickly identify that here by looking at the authentication section. I can also expand the group policy sections where I can see each individual policy that affected this user session down to the policy name and how long each one is taking to execute inside of the environment. I can also drill down further and take a look at the network bandwidth inside of the data center. So between the session host and the delivery controller, I can take a look and see if there was some poor connectivity there. And then, of course, I can escalate over to the network team if needed. So effectively, what I'm able to get is if there is a poor logon, in the same way this particular healthcare customer was able to identify, I'm able to quickly identify exactly where the problem is so that I can collapse a troubleshooting time frame and sort of focus on fixing that issue as opposed to spending my time going hours into each one of those checklists trying to find exactly where the problem was. For this particular healthcare customer, they were able to find, as we mentioned before, some group policy issues here. They had a drive mapping policy that was, of course, they were mapping sessions to a drive that was decommissioned. And then, of course, they were able to take a look at the VDI server for, the sessions. They were able to identify high memory utilization, as well as for the hypervisor host, high CPU ready for particular hosts that were supporting sessions in the environment. And they were able to do that all in one single view here for that particular user or for those users, those affected users in the environment. So that's how they're able to troubleshoot. The next thing that they wanted to do was to be able to anticipate these things before they happen. And that's when they would flip over to the automatic discovery and dependency map view for Citrix. And this is going to automatically map out all of the components in the environment. It will then add over 250 monitoring rules to the environment. These are going to be monitoring for conditions, failure points, thresholds, and events from an infrastructure perspective that can or will cause end user experience issues. So if you have resource utilization problems on your delivery controllers, they start to turn red or orange depending on the severity, of course. And then you can click on them where you, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see resource utilization, as I mentioned, any context-specific health checks based on the role of the component in the environment. So, of course, delivery controller rules are going to be vastly different from storefront servers, etc. And any alerts that fire off on these machines. So as issues take place, this is one way, because of the embedded intelligence and the alerting capabilities, as well as the knock capabilities of this view, that you could identify these issues before users start to call in and complain about them, so you can sort of work on them. And if they do call in and complain, IT has the confidence to say, hey, we are aware of these and we are we're working on them, and we're going to get them resolved very shortly. So with that, I know our lab environment doesn't have very much going on inside of it. So I'm going to jump back over to the presentation to just show you what an actual customer environment is going to look like from a GPO perspective, right? Where we open up that section and you can see here it's a long log on time, and we're able to break open each one of these group policies that are affecting the session, showing you exactly where the slowness is coming from a group policy perspective, from an authentication perspective, so on and so forth. And of course, we're talking very specifically about Citrix in this case, but we get all of these metrics for VMware Horizon as well. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, a customer screenshot where you can see a 54 seconds within group policies, and we're able to identify that there was a printer policy that was taking about 50 of those seconds. So I will pass it over to Stacy to talk about the next use case.
Thank you, Yemi. So what Yemi just walked through is really that core piece about troubleshooting slow logons, right? How do you isolate root cause? A bigger piece, and why many organizations invest in a purpose-built solution like ours, is to actually avoid those issues completely. And so this is what one of our customers is a top US airline. They came to us and ironically had similar problems to the home healthcare. They had reservation specialists across the US as well as in Europe, and they were constantly complaining about slow logons into their system, which happened to be called Sabre. And they did not allow any software to be built on premises, and they wanted to be alerted anytime there was an outage or slow logons were present so that they could address the issues before their reservation specialist got to work. Because again, if reservation specialists couldn't log in or it was slow, it was impacting their customer service. And so while people were trying to run scripts, some people were trying to actively log in before reservations scheduled their day, it really was inefficient. So they wanted a way that they could proactively, continually test the availability and the performance of Citrix that would then get into the application to ensure that they were running accurately. And they also needed to run this within the cloud infrastructure. Yemi, do you want to go ahead and talk about how they deployed this and then talk through the example of how they went ahead and prevented through application availability monitoring?
Absolutely. So if we look on this slide here, this is the actual deployment architecture for this airline. And you can see they have a central Goliath console that is deployed in AWS. And then they also have these application launchers deployed in different regions in AWS as well. And what's actually happening is from these different regions, there's a lightweight piece of technology that is logging on and launching the Sabre application 24/7 from these regions. so that if there is an issue that is going to present itself to the users as not being able to access the environment, IT is going to get an alert before users actually start to complain so they can get ahead of those issues and solve them. The other thing is, as Stacy mentioned, relying on users' subjective information. This technology is actually going to take screenshots of each step of the process. So not only does IT have an early warning system, right, but they also have very important, a pivotal aspect to that as well, which is the screenshots and objective evidence to be able to see what error messages and things would present to the users without relying on them to replicate or describe what they see on the screen. So to give you some perspective as to what's actually taking place, from each one of these sort of application launchers at the different regions, I have a quick video here showing this technology actually launching a Citrix session. So from that location, the technology is going to open up a web browser to Netscaler or storefront page. It's going to accept any security statements, same way an end user would, log in the same way an end user would. It can navigate the storefront page after it confirms that it loads. And then it's going to start launching these applications. You can launch as many applications as you would like. You can schedule this on a basis that fits your user's needs. In the case of this airline, they start scheduling launches about 4 hours before the users start their workday. And if there's an issue with any step of the process that presents itself as a user not being able to access the environment, IT then gets a real-time alert, and then they're able to analyze and understand what impacted that session from this page here within the technology. This is the Application Availability Analysis tab. And quickly, I'm going to do some page geography. The top section, you can see the two sections here. The top section is a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place across the environment. The blue bars here represent the average launch time. And then the trend line here is going to be overall availability. So out of 100%, how available are these launches or the applications that you're launching from your different locations? You can see, of course, at the top, you can filter based on date range, based on the locations that you're launching these applications from. So in the case of this airline, you would show AWS, East, West, and Central. And you can also filter this based on the applications or desktops that you're using this technology to launch. So this is a very helpful sort of dashboarding and reporting tool because you can quickly print this out to send it over to management or a customer to show this is what availability has looked like over the last month, 2 months, etc. Now, the bottom section, this is where you're going to go when you've received an alert. There's an issue with a particular launch, and it presents itself in a way that the user cannot then access the environment. So now I can see the date and time of the launches, what applications or desktops were being launched, where they were being launched from, and ultimately whether those launches were successful or if they failed. If they failed, I can see exactly at what stage they failed. And then I can drill in further by clicking here on this magnifying glass icon, where I can now see screenshots of each step of the process. So in this particular case, it's this particular application failed at the enumeration stage, meaning that the application that I wanted to launch was not available on the storefront page for these particular user credentials. Now this could be, let's say, a localhost cache issue, right? Maybe the database was down. This could be a configuration issue. However, this is something that's going to impact, in this case, the reservation specialist's ability to book sessions or to book flights, which ultimately impacts the bottom line of this airline. So this technology is able to alert to these particular types of issues, down to being able to see the error message that would present to the users. So in this case, the airline is able to get ahead of these issues and quickly solve them and limit the end user impact at all, which ultimately is going to save them tons of downtime and ultimately more money. So number one, the early warning system and the ability to get ahead of these issues. And then secondly, and of course more importantly, the ability to quickly solve them and prevent them from happening or from impacting the users. So with that, that's how they were able to get ahead of these sort of issues that could impact the user's ability to access the environment. And the final piece, of course, then is being able to document this information and make sure that you're able to confirm that some of these permanent fix actions have actually been put in place. And that's when our customers are able to leverage our reporting, to be able to sort of show management or to show improvements in the environment, or to show whether or not these fixes have actually improved the logons or improved the experience as a whole. So I'm just going to quickly run through some of these reports that we have out of the box, as well as some of the custom reports that our customers are able to leverage using some third-party reporting tools. So the first one I have here is the end user experience report. This is a sort of very, is a sort of 50,000 foot type of report that breaks down the users, of course, on the left-hand side of the screen, what applications that they're using, some information about their connection, of course. It's going to break down their logon time, their latency, and their connection speed as they're accessing the environment. This gives you a nice understanding of, okay, for any particular user at any particular time, what is the overall experience within our environment. But then we break that even further here into a specific logon duration report. And here you can see now there's the users, of course. And now you can see whether these are reconnected sessions or sort of initial sessions. And then the breakdowns of the different stages of the process. This is very heavily used by IT to understand what portions of the environment, what portions of the logons do we need to tackle next in order to deliver a better experience, or again, to show improvements in the environment as a whole. Now, of course, these are CSV reports. They're exported PDFs, mostly CSV. You can then, of course, manipulate them in Excel as you need to. But of course, there's a need to show more sort of, or to create reports that are more management focused, or to show trends and things like that over time. So we actually have custom templates for Power BI that allow us to, or allow our customers to sort of show different changes based on the different types of, or the different sections of metrics that are available in the technology. So if we look here on this next one, this is going to show the average logon duration, per session count, per stage of the process. But it also breaks it down based on the different applications, as you can see here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. You can see the session count per day as well as sessions per hour. So to give you an ability to make these trending analysis for applications, and also based on how many connections you have in the environment. The next one is going to break down, of course, logon duration, again, based on the different sections of the logon process. But here you can see it's broken down per day. So you can see sort of the max logon time, average logon times. You can see the individual days. So maybe you have more users coming in on Mondays as you would on Fridays. And you can make that trending analysis to understand, how that actually affects users as a whole. We have a number of these other reports that break down things like productivity, user connections, and things like that. But these are just a couple of examples of the out of box, as well as integrated reports that we have and our customers are leveraging to document this information over time. So with that, I'll pass it over to Stacy, and we can head over to questions.
Thank you, Yemi. And before we head into questions, we always get this question, so I like to lead with it, is how long would it take to get your product up and running? Well, we offer a white glove service, so we can get you up and running really in under 2 hours. And with that, we completely install the product. You work with one of our technical consultants to get key out-of-the-box reports and alerts set up. We walk you through how to follow a troubleshooting workflow, just like Yemi showed earlier. And then keep in mind, we have embedded intelligence and automation. So we're going to automatically discover your environment. You need to do nothing. We're going to help you automatically set up those alerts. They're embedded in our product. You're just going to tune them to meet your needs and your environmental needs. And we also have help sections throughout the product. So all of those screens we were diving into the Logon, we have a specific help section that you can go into, and it will explain how to use the data and metrics in order to troubleshoot. So we actually have customers that give this to their help desk. We have a university where their students use this product in order to support their fellow students if there should be slow logons or slow performance issues. So this is something that you can get up and running very quickly and also operationalize not only within your own team, but potentially teams outside of yourself. All right, Yemi. So with that, let's turn it over. We had a few questions come in. One customer question just came from Jack, and he's asking, can you prove that poor internet connection is a source of remote worker slowness?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we showed that earlier, and I'm just going to flip back over to the technology to give additional insights there. So inside of a user session, as we clicked on when we're talking about breaking down the user's logon times, you can quickly, in the summary tab specifically, you can look here at the round trip time, and of course, this session's really not poor, but you can see. And you can leverage round trip time to determine if a user is or is not having a poor session. You can then see that and correlate that with network latency, which is going to tell you if they are having a problem, is that being driven by poor network connectivity? And of course, network's going to take into consideration internal network connectivity, what bandwidth the user has at their location, based on the question and things like that. So that's going to tell us, okay, if network latency is, for instance, if network latency is high, and that's actually correlating with high round trip time, then it's a network problem. Then you can look at this bottom metric here, connection speed. This is the amount of bandwidth, basically the user's download speed at their location, wherever they're connecting in from, whether it's a Starbucks, their home office, a branch location. You can tell how much bandwidth or how much download speed they have for this Citrix session. So in the case where you want to identify if it is a poor network configuration or poor Wi-Fi at that user's location, this connection speed will definitively tell you if that's the case. For instance, we see customers that have network latency that's really high, and that correlates directly with connection speed being poor. And this is how you're going to be able to drill into that. And that is without even having to drill into some of the other tabs that break down more additional information about their connection. Hopefully that was able to answer the question.
Great, Yemi. Thank you for that. Next question we have comes from Sean, and Sean is asking if we can go ahead and integrate with any third-party applications.
Of course, yeah. Now, something that, a common use for our technology is, okay, you have all of these alerts that can alert me to conditions, failure points, issues with connectivity, issues with user sessions, and we have our own tools, like maybe it's ServiceNow or MoveSoft that we use, an ITSM tool internally. Can you send those alerts over to those tools? The answer is yes. We do it in a number of different ways, whether that is, SNMP traps or syslog or anything else like that. We can definitely send our alerts and integrate with your existing tools just to make sure you have a sort of seamless flow for alerting.
Great. Next question comes from Lois, and she wants to know, can you set up alerts for issues that could cause slow logons, like lack of resources? Absolutely, and that is exactly how a lot of our customers use the technology.
Of course, you can get alerted to, a user having an issue with, let's say, their logon time, right? If a logon time has reached a certain threshold, you can automatically get an alert to that. But you can also get alerts to, resource utilization. There may be some Citrix brokering service failures and errors that took place in the environment. You can actually flip over to our alert dashboard here that might give us some additional context. But as you can see here on the screen, when we're talking about, resource utilization, specific services, whether that's for VMware Horizon or Citrix, any issue that could impact users' ability to access or to have good sessions in the environment, we can alert to, and then of course, send out to the different tools that are available in your IT organization.
Great. Andrew asks, how are you different from Citrix Director?
That's a good question. I think we get that question enough times that we always have it in our slide deck here. And let me flip over to that. I would say there's a couple of different, or a couple of things that are sort of definitively different from, with our technology and any of those Citrix or any other sort of free tools. And the difference is, number one, visibility. Those tools are very, very good at monitoring the core Citrix or the core sort of proprietary technology components. So if you look on this slide in the middle of the screen, you can see that, everything that is not red is what Director is going to be monitoring, which of course is very good, but we know that there are a lot more things that impact user experience that you're not going to get from Director, like endpoints, the applications that they're running, the hypervisor visibility, those back-end systems, and then take into consideration those core specific user experience metrics and things that impact that, like their Wi-Fi or their connectivity at their location, network configurations inside of your data center, user access, so on and so forth. So what the difference here is, Goliath is going to monitor and give you deep metrics into everything that you see here on the screen, effectively giving what we call end-to-end visibility into anything that impacts that user's session or their ability to access their session. And the other thing that I want to point out is the ability to report and to collect this information on a historical as well as real-time basis. Having the information to troubleshoot is very nice, but then the additional piece then is to have this historically trended over time so you can make sure that these permanent fix actions are actually solving issues and preventing them from happening again in the future.
All right, Yemi, we have one more, so if anyone else has questions, please submit. This comes from Santosh, and he wants to know, do you have a report that shows if users are working within Citrix?
Absolutely, yeah. And as you can imagine, with this sort of surge of remote users, a lot of customers would like to know not only are users working, but when are they working, and what does the sort of new work environment look like for users that are now working from home. We actually have an end user productivity report that I have here on the screen. And this is going to break down, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, the users, what infrastructure they're connecting in via. You can then see their start time of their sessions, their end times, of course, the duration of their session, and a couple of metrics here. Number one is the interaction, which is the amount of time that they are actually spending within their session creating ICA traffic. So this is going to take into consideration keyboard and mouse movements. This is going to take into consideration maybe audio bandwidth. Maybe they're doing something graphically intensive. All the different types of traffic that can happen inside of a user session, it's going to take into consideration and come up with an accurate metric on how long they were actually being interactive or active inside of their session. Conversely, you can then see their inactivity time. So the duration of their session, their active time, inactivity time, or idle time. there's an interaction percentage, and then a key metric here, which is the max inactivity. So this is the largest block of concurrent time within the user session that they were inactive. And then finally, of course, on the right-hand side, you can see the applications that was being published to the particular user in their session. So this typically, we've found, has been very helpful to customers to understand our user is working, but not necessarily always about the big brother aspect to see what users are doing, but to understand if sort of poor issues are actually directly impacting users' ability to access or to work inside of their sessions, but and also to understand how users are working, especially in the surge of remote worker sort of time frame that we're in today.
Well, thank you, Yemi. Oh, one more question that just came in. Do you have a report on versions the endpoint is running, receiver and workspace?
Absolutely. We, of course, collect that information. We show that in our automatic discovery and dependency map view. And I didn't pull that up here, but I can show you that here in our automatic discovery view here, where we can drill down into the delivery layer. And you can see here at the bottom right-hand corner, the receiver versions that are running in your environment. But ultimately, the quickest way that our customers get that information is just by exporting out here the session display. So here I can quickly adjust what tabs I want to show up here. So if I want to remove some of these other metrics here or things like that, hit save. Now I can see the user and I can see what receiver version they have, and I can quickly export out the CSV as needed. So our customers very heavily leverage this session display to be able to report on those in the environment. Hopefully that answers the question.
All right, Yemi. I think that wraps it up. I want to thank everyone who joined today. I also want to thank you, Yemi, for your time. If anyone is interested, whether it be a free trial, a custom demo, please email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com and we'll be happy to set you up with whatever detail that you're looking for, or if you have additional questions. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.